Welcome Strategy Battle Gamers to another GBHL YouTube channel video. You're here with your channel host GBHL James, bringing you a little mini series of videos which is going to be reviewing a little bit of terrain and some bits and pieces that I've been picking up recently for gaming. Now this mini series is going to be 3 videos and it's going to focus on 3 different areas. One, it's going to start off with the thing that you can see in front of me here, and we're going to be discussing in this video the Frontline gaming battle mats, which are made by Frontline Gaming over in North America, which I was lucky enough to pick some up from at the Nova Open. We'll be talking about that in this video. In the second one of this mini video series, we're actually going to be talking about some of the conflicts terrain. These are the pre-made buildings, pre-painted buildings from conflicts. I know a few of the TOs across the country have got those, so we'll be reviewing some of those buildings and showing them on the board. And then in the third and final video, I'm going to have a very special treat, and I'm going to be reviewing some terrain by the absolutely magnificent Rick Fryer, who does a lot of the terrain for Mid-Sussex Wargamers, and you will have seen his terrain in a very recent video when we looked at Mediceld for the Assault on Edoras battle report that we did with Dunland versus All Mounted Rohan. So what I'm going to do in this video, where we review the battle mats, you can see I've got one out here in front of me, but I'm actually going to start off showing you how they are packaged from the very beginning. Okay, because they do actually come in these fabulous bags here. So I'm going to get them out and I'm going to show you how easy they were to transport, and also have a little look at the material, what that's like, as well as the actual designs and patterns themselves. So we're going to start off by looking at how these guys were actually packaged to me. Now, as you can see, that they have these canvas sacks that they are rolled into. These are designed, of course, to be transportable and nice and light, I have to say, quite easy. Not particularly firm and sturdy. You do see that there's a little bit of a bend there as I pick it up. With each of them. They were actually boxed first, so if you are looking to get these, don't worry about them being sent over in this kind of flimsy bag. They do actually come in a big box, which I took them out of in order to transport them back. And that's probably a really good point to go through first of all in this review, is that in order to get these back, I had to take these mats out, which are made of like a mouse mat material. You can see this. It's reasonably thick, it's not quite as thick as a mouse mat, but I had to fold these up, and this is the first time that I've actually laid them out since bringing them back home from out my luggage, and not a single crease in these bad boys, which is really good news. So they do transport quite well. So let's have a little look at these canvas sacks. Okay, now each one of the canvas sacks, on the end it tells you which kind of board that you managed to pick up, or mat that you managed to pick up. You can see here that I picked up an Alpine one, and what I'm hoping to do with this one is do a few sort of the Fall of Fornost, maybe do the Attack on Ravenhill, those kind of boards, doing battles up in the Eton Moors, really just get a little bit of theme and changing the colour palette for some of the battle reports. You can see that I also got the Grassy Plains one here, which is the one that you can see down on my table. And then over here I also picked up it's the Urban Combat one. Now this one I think is possibly my favourite, which I'll come to in a little while's time, but this is to represent like an old town. Now I've also picked up, which I've put in the wrong map because the Grassy one's down, I've also picked out this one. This is the Barren Wasteland. The Barren Wasteland, so a little bit more sort of the browny colours, a little bit more deserty. Okay, so let's have a little look at how these bad boys come. Okay, so they come in this zipper canvas bag, which is reasonably resistant. I don't think it will hold up to too much, but it does the job. It keeps them rolled up in here, which should make it quite easy to sort of transport them around to your mates' houses, transporting them to gaming centres if you wanted to use a particular mat. And that's one of the things that I do like about these. These will be making a showing in quite a lot of my battle reports, and we don't always film at my house here. Sometimes we film at Jamie's, sometimes we film at the Northwest Gaming Centre mostly, and it'd be nice to sort of mix it up and try and get these battle mats down for that. So the fact that they can be transported easy is really appealing to me. Okay, so let's have a little look at how they actually come and roll out. So this is the Arctic one here, and as you can see, if I bring this a little bit closer to the camera, that's about the thickness. I would say that's probably about 3mm thick. But if I scrunch that up, it's pretty resistant. So it's quite rubbery. It's probably a little bit more rubbery than a mouse mat on the bottom, which is probably where its resistance comes from. One of the big selling points that they have on the website for these is that they're also pretty waterproof as well. So if you're having a kind of game where you're drinking beer or you're having a juice or something like that and you spill it on them, it should be reasonably easy to wipe up. So in terms of the actual material itself, I'm pretty impressed. I was a little bit worried that these might maybe be a little bit thin and you might get tears in them, but actually the neoprene material holds up quite well, and it seems to be a growing trend with independent mat producers, because of course Games Workshop no longer sell their battle mat, to go for this kind of mouse matty kind of material. This is my first experience of it, and I have to say it's pretty damn good from what I have experienced so far. Of course, as we play with it and as we get a little bit of wear and tear, I'll be able to sort of update you on that situation, probably as and when I'm using it, but I'm reasonably impressed so far. Now, the only things that I've seen that really I can compare to this is one, the Citadel battle mat, which is a lot stronger in some ways, a lot firmer. It's a thicker, heavier matting, but one of the things about these mats is that they do collapse and roll back down to flat pretty easy, and they don't slide. So if I try and move that on the table, there is no sliding at all. All I've got underneath here is a 4x4 bit of MDF wood, so or plyboard even. So you can see there that this is pretty handy for some of the gaming. So I'm pretty impressed with the material. The other things that I can compare it to is I did come across some Malifaux mats. If you were watching my journey vlog for the Nova Open, you'll see that I met a South African couple who were at the Nova Open selling and showing off their 3x3 battle mats for the Malifaux, and they looked absolutely fantastic. They were thinner than this material, but it looked like they held up pretty well over the weekend as well, so I'd be pretty interested to see if those guys bring out some 4x4 terrain. And also the other thing that I've got to compare it to is the Guild Ball battle mats, and the Guild Ball battle mats, again, they seem to be pretty thin, but that same kind of idea, pretty resilient, seem to lie down quite flat. You could fold them, you can roll them, and they seem to go back into shape, and it also seems to me that you can get a reasonably high level of detail on the actual mat itself. And I think that's the bit of this this review that really we should show you next. So we're going to actually show you the design and the patterns of the top surface, and make sure you comment below and let me know what you think about them as well. So let's start off with the battle mat that we've actually got down. So this is the Grassy Plains battle mat from Frontline Gaming. Some of you might have seen some of these battle mats before. If you are a fan of watching mini wargaming videos online, then these have become very popular, especially to the guys in the States who seem to have a lot better access to them than we do in the UK. So if you watch the likes of Guerrilla Military Games or miniwargaming.com or any of those kind of channels, it's quite possible that you'll see this kind of board. Now this one in particular I tend to have seen for War Machine. It seems to work quite well with that because it is quite bright. It's got quite a high fantasy-esque kind of nature to it in terms of terrain. Now the idea behind it is that of course you have the various grassy plain areas that you can see in between the paths, but then you do have the paths as well. And one way that I'll show this before we move on to a different board, one way that I think would be really good to set up this mat is to either set up some kind of rural village where you could actually place sort of rural looking houses, maybe some of the Rohirrim houses that I've got in between, and then of course you can use the grassy areas to maybe put some of your hills, put down some of your trees around, and then you've naturally got the paths on there which are marked out by the brown markings, of course, which are there naturally. So it sets itself up to be a reasonably nice board. Now this wasn't actually the one that I was going to go for originally. They do also do, I believe it's called the Swamp battle mat. Now this is a little bit more realistic, and I think it would fit better with the Lord of the Rings look that we of course do in most of our battle reports, because it's not as bright, it's not as garish. I think this one is pretty bright and pretty garish. We'll zoom in and have a little look at the detail shortly. But I did want to go for that one because it's got less of these paths. I think that this particular battle mat is very busy on the paths front. I think a few less, and I think it would look quite a bit better, although we'll have to see when we set up some of the terrain in a little while. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to pick the camera up and I'm going to zoom in and give you a little bit of close-up detail. So here we go, we're looking in nice and close on the battle mat itself now. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner here, you do have the Table War Frontline Gaming logos, just to make sure that you've got the real thing. Now, one thing that really impresses me about the nature of the designs themselves is the ability for it to look relatively three-dimensional, even though of course it's completely flat. And that's quite impressive about design. So not just in the grass, I don't know if you look there, if I actually get in nice and close and almost try and come down to the table level itself, as I point the camera up, that actually looks like there is some serious texture there, but that is completely flat. That is completely flat. So that in itself is pretty impressive. And even when I come down here to this level and get you in line with the paths, you've got a very similar kind of effect. I think that they've nailed it on the grass in that front. It does create the illusion that there is texture, and of course that's what you want from this kind of flat battle mat and this flat kind of playing surface. Now, one of the other advantages of that is because of the type of material and because it's completely flat, it means that you're not going to have miniatures falling all over the place and sliding everywhere. They are actually going to grip nicely. You're not going to be balancing your metal miniatures hoping that they don't fall over. And of course, because it's flat, because you can spill things on it, you're not going to be worried about the fact that your flock is going to scrape off or you're going to get on your models or anything along those kind of lines. So that in itself is very, very impressive. And if I just swoop around across the battlefield like so, again, it gives you a really good idea of the texture of this board and the effect of it and how that might work once you start applying and putting terrain on there. As you can see, it's very, very, very nice. But you can also see the points I was talking about before, about the fact that it is pretty bright. It is quite bright. So the kind of boards that I'll be looking to do on here is do foresty based board, rural environments, maybe little rural Rohan villages, as well as doing you know, fights in woods for elves and the such like. So that is the Grassy Plains battle map from Frontline Gaming. I hope that you like that one, and you can see that it's going to really lend itself very, very well to filming on the channel. It comes up very, very nice on the camera with the lighting. It looks realistic, and I'll try and get some final shots now with some actual terrain on the board itself. And so a very, very quick example of how you could possibly look to set up this kind of board, this kind of battle map using various trees. I think it'd lend itself to having a lot more terrain than I have available in my cellar right now. So if you think about some of the battle reports that we have done at Damien's house, we've got a lot of the single individual trees. Imagine the board where a lot of those green areas were filled with that kind of terrain. But hopefully that gives you an idea of the kind of battlefield that you can create with the Grassy Plains battle map from Frontline Gaming. So what we're going to do next is we're going to show you the Alpine battle map, and this is the one, of course, which creates a snowy environment for you to play your miniature war games. And here we have it, team. This is the second of our Frontline Gaming battle mats that we're going to review. This is our Alpine battle map that we have got. As you can see, this is quite an impressive looking map. Now, for something which is supposed to replicate a relatively barren kind of landscape, it creates quite a lot of depth and quite a lot of life, and that's very clever how it manages to do that. So think of the texture of snow and what that looks like. Even from up in this position, it looks like there is texture on that board, and that's one of the really clever things about the way that this has been printed and designed. A lot of design work has clearly gone into these to try and create that kind of effect, that when you are stood here, and even when you get up nice and close like we did on the camera for the Grassy Plains, that it looks like you're playing on a textured surface. So of course it's not just a barren white board. It looks like that you've got areas of rocks, of depth. It actually looks, from this position as I'm looking on the camera, it looks as if you've almost got slight sort of rocky hills that are going around the board, and that you've got little sort of dips in the land, little bits where you have a bit of height. It looks even in this position here like there is a hill going off to that left hand side as we're looking at it on the board, and that's incredibly, incredibly clever. I actually really like this one, and I'm looking forward to doing some battle reports on it, because as I said at the beginning of the video, I think it's going to be really cool to be able to have different colour palettes in our battle reports each time. So of course we are limited sometimes by the terrain that we have, but even by just having these different kind of battle mats, it just takes you away from some of the grassy battle mats that we've had to use in the past for a lot of our battle reports. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up a little bit of terrain on here. I don't have any kind of alpine snowy terrain. I'm going to set up a little bit of a ruin, and then we're going to zoom in nice and close so you can see what I mean about the detail, not just from this position but also when you get nice and close to the battle mat. So we're coming in for the close-up shot, the swooping shot, which shows just how much detail and how much depth this print on what is a flat mouse mat material board, what can be created. And I have to say that even looking through the camera, it looks even better than in real life. A real illusion is created. And you can see the kind of battlefield that you could set up here. I mean, you've got some snowy ruins, some snowy trees. You could really be imaginative, and you could truly get quite a lot of variety, I think, in even what is supposed to be a relatively barren board. So that is our Arctic board, our snowy alpine plains from Frontline Gaming. So what we're going to do next is we're going to show you the next one, which is the Barren Wasteland, and this would be great for doing battles around the Morannon, the Black Gate, even going into Mordor, and even being set up for desert style battles for the Haradrim and the forces of Umbar and the likes. So we'll get that out now and we'll show you what that is all about. So I'm actually turning the camera on here as I roll out the plains, or the Barren plains here, just to show you how easy it is to lie these guys out and how sort of heavy fitting they are. So I've left the grassy plains mat down because we're going to use that to put some terrain on at the end of everything, and then literally just rolling it out like that. There's a little bit of a wipe over. Bear in mind that these guys have been in transit. Not only have they been rolled up, but they've also been folded, and there is not a single crease in there. So some might say, well, what kind of terrain would you use if you're going for a barren land like this? Well, I think that this particular one creates a huge amount of depth for what would normally be a kind of a dull style of battlefield, which is that kind of barren rocky land, or it could be. And as you can see, just even with the different colours, the way that it's created the height and depth by having some of these lighter areas appearing like they are deeper and having some of these darker areas appear that they are higher up, just with this flat mouse mat, again, it can allow the gamer and the mini war gamer, as it were, to really get lost in the idea that they are where they are actually playing the game. And of course that's a big part of playing these miniature games, whether it's Lord of the Rings, Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, any of these other games, not just Games Workshop ones. A big part of it is that immersion level, and I'm really feeling that these battle mats are going to really help sort of increase that immersion level, not just for me and my opponents while we're playing and filming the games, but also for some of you guys back at home while you're watching some of our battle reports. So let us know what you think. I really like this one. I really like this one. I have been thinking what kind of terrain that would do, what kind of boards would I do. I actually really like the idea, which is inspired and motivated by LOTR SBG Battles, which is a YouTube channel which is run by Rob over in Denver, Colorado. We met him at the Nova Open, which was really nice considering we've been chatting on YouTube and the One Ring and such for a few years now. We actually met him over there, really great guy, got to play him as well, which was superb, and he brought with him a beautifully painted Minas Morgul army, and I can imagine this being the Morgul Vale almost, with the gates of Morgul over there, having the bridge coming across, having some rock faces that were going up the side there with the stairs that lead up to Kira the Fungal, as well as some other sort of statues along the way, some of those grotesques and gargoyles, those types of things. I actually really like the idea that this could be that kind of board, but not just that, it would make for a great Black Gates board. So imagine if we had Black Gates, the actual Black Gates over there in the far corner. Again, you could create rocky areas, you could create dips and crevices, and I think that would look absolutely superb. I'm not actually going to showcase and put any terrain on this. I don't feel that I have enough variety of terrain really at the moment to really do justice to this particular mat, although that is something I'm of course working on. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you up close, so again you can really see and appreciate hopefully the work that has gone into the design of the prints and how that can bring something which is completely flat to life. So we're going to do that now. So here we go, it's penultimate Frontline Gaming battle mat, and this is the Barren Wasteland one, which I absolutely truly love. Now it's interesting because of course it has to create a completely different design to, for example, the grass and the grassy plains, but it still manages to create that 3D effect. So I don't know if you can see there, and that must be some cleverness with sort of where the design is. There must be some kind of top layer on, like you get with some 3D things, so it creates the idea of depth. Some of this actually looks like it might be photographic or pulled from photos of rocky areas, but to create that 3D effect on something flat is incredibly clever in my opinion, and it's one of the things that drew me to choosing Frontline Gaming for the gaming mats. It is a shame that these don't retail in the UK. I think there are UK providers and distributors, but I think it costs a little bit more and there isn't as much of a range, and that's why I was quite keen to get them when I was out in the States. But so far I would highly recommend these. This is not a sponsored video. I wish that Frontline Gaming would send me some of the other mats, maybe the Swamp one. Maybe it's a bit of a thank you for doing this showcase video, who knows. That would be absolutely fantastic. But I am a huge fan of these. I'm looking forward to playing some games on them. And I'm going to show you possibly my favourite one, which is the urban one. I'm going to show that for you now. And here we have it, the final of my battle mats to showcase from Frontline Gaming. This is the urban battle mat, the Urban Combat 2 battle mat. Now there are a couple of different patterns, and although I've got all 4x4 mats, mainly because most of the Lord of the Rings games that I play at least are on a 4x4 table. Very rare that we go to a 6x4. That tends to be for bigger battles of maybe 700 points plus. And the design does differ between the sizes, absolutely for sure, but this is the 4x4 version, and this is actually a favourite of a couple of the wargaming channels that are out there, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. One, this kind of board can of course work quite well in any kind of setting really. So because of the nature of the cobbled stones, the areas where you can place buildings, it works really well from a fantasy point of view. So I have seen quite a lot of Mordheim style battle reports on this kind of board, those kind of skirmish games. I've also seen the Age of Sigmar played on this kind of board, but as well as that I've also seen people putting futuristic buildings on and doing Infinity style battle reports or Necromunda or those types of games. I actually think that this board would make a really good, once sort of fenced off, a very good Guild Ball board for my butchers when I decide to sort of create a pitch. I actually think that this is where I will play them, because I imagine Guild Ball very much to be played in the streets of some medieval fantasy town. And that's one of the things that I'm gonna definitely use this for. Again, what are the things that we love about these mats? Well, as well as all of the things about how resilient they seem to be, the fact that they seem to be quite easy to clean up, very easy to transport, to roll up, they don't damage very easily, whether you have to fold them or roll them up. Despite all of those things, that would all be for nothing if the design work itself wasn't very good, and the design work on this is absolutely fantastic. So you can see, even with how the layout of the roads are, it creates for lots of different options when popping down your terrain. So yeah, you're probably going to have the areas that are road reasonably clear, unless you're putting blockades down and things along those lines, and there might be relatively definite areas to kind of put your houses and things, but you could really mix up this board quite a lot. On top of that, the design work in terms of how 3D it looks, again, hopefully you get a nice idea from here just how much texture is implied when looking at it from a distance. And of course what we're going to do now is I'm going to get down and I'm going to zoom in and show you how it looks close up on what is probably my favourite of the boards. And here we go, we're going up the streets in the Urban Combat 2 battle map from Frontline Gaming. And again, very impressive how they managed to create a form of depth. If I get down to ground level, it does look almost 3D-esque, which is incredibly clever. Perhaps less so on this board, which is quite surprising. but I think that the level of detail that is on it kind of makes up for it. I think what they've managed to achieve on the other three, considering they are much more desolate landscapes, is cleverer. But I suppose with this kind of mat you don't necessarily need that as much, because there's quite a lot of detail already, whereas the others, because they're relatively barren, quite a bit of work seems to have been done in the design process to kind of really give it a lift. Although saying that, there are particular areas which definitely look like they've got a tremendous amount of texture. This area over here, if you can see that and make that out, it definitely does. As this area down here in particular, so the bits where you've got the kind of smaller gravelly paving, compared to these bigger bits here, although still it does look like there's plenty of broken rubble and the like. So I can imagine that I'll be doing lots of different kinds of battle reports on here. I also think that these mats are going to be absolutely superb for future battle companies, campaigns, and of course narrative campaigns when we get around to doing those types of things. What I'm actually going to do now as I close this video out is I'm going to show you this board with some terrain and give you a little bit of a teaser for the next terrain review, and also talk about what I actually think about these mats and what I would rate them out of 10 in different areas. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you the board with some terrain on now. So there we have it, Strategy Battle Gamers. Here endeth my review of the Frontline gaming battle mats. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of not just what they look like, not just how they seem to perform, what their advantages are, but also a really good in-depth look at the design. Which of course is very, very important when you're choosing whether this is going to be something for you. So what I've done, just as I give you a few little pointers about some key things I think when buying these, so you've got to appreciate stuff like the cost, you've got to look at the material itself. Is it going to be resilient? Is it going to hold up well? The design and the immersion level, whether it's going to help you sort of really immerse yourself in whichever game that you are playing. So while I've done that, I've actually put out some of the buildings which I'm going to be reviewing in my next of this series of terrain reviews, when we look at some of the conflicts buildings. As you can see, even just dotting about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is as many as I've got at the moment, even just dotting some of those about on this terrain really brings it to life and makes a huge difference. I'm very much looking forward to playing on this board, not just playing Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit strategy battle game, it has to be said, but maybe trying out some other games as well. Maybe get my Saga ready, because I know a lot of people have been wanting to see a little bit of Saga, and maybe also when my Guild Ball team is finished, doing some Butcher's bat reps on there. So what do I think about these? Well, let's look at first impressions. When I saw them at first, I was dreading having to bring them back over to the UK. They were in huge, incredibly heavy boxes. Damien, GBHL Damien, was very doubtful of my ability to be able to get these back to the UK, because of course they're 4x4 and they were in big boxes and they were quite heavy, and they all got to experience that when I asked them to help me take them up to the hotel room after picking them up. However, in terms of being able to transport them, the fact that one, I could fold them up without the material actually ripping, was absolutely superb and a lifesaver. Although it added a ton of weight to my luggage, it didn't add enough that I struggled to get everything on board or take up so much space. So that was a huge plus. And at the end of transit, I was worried that because they'd been folded, that there would be crease marks in them, which will have of course ruined it for me. There isn't a single crease mark in any of them. They all lie completely flat, and for that I am going to have to give these guys 10 out of 10 in terms of ability to transport it. The fact that they then make that even easier on a going to your mate's house, or getting them out for a casual game at your own home, or even going down to your local gaming centre and just using something which is a little bit different to their terrain. The fact that you've got these things, which, you know, these kind of canvas things don't hold up particularly well. I know that because I've got something of similar kind of material that I use for like power bags in the gym. For what we're going to be using it for wargaming, it's actually perfectly okay. Now, you do store them long, but the fact that they are long and pretty thin means it is quite easy to store them. Whether I'm going to store them down here in my cellar where it can get a little bit damp, I'm not so sure, so that will be another test. Will it hold up to that? But I'm probably going to keep them wrapped up and maybe hang them at the top of the stairs and get a couple of dehumidifiers around there. Okay, so really impressed with the ability to transport them. Cost. Now these things are reasonably expensive. Okay, they are reasonably expensive to have shipped over from the USA, which I believe is where they're made, or Canada, I can't quite remember. but it is quite expensive to do that. There are UK suppliers, so I would definitely go and check that out. It seems that they are not widely available in lots of gaming stores. Somebody seems to have bought the distributing rights over in the UK. That's what it looks like, although I could be quite wrong, and it could just be that they've not got the exposure that they need to be in independent gaming stores yet. But I would recommend independent gaming stores, if they can and if they option to, of trying to retail these kind of mats, because I personally think that they're absolutely brilliant. But that's my own opinion. Are they worth it? Yeah, definitely. If you compare them to the prices now that it costs for the Citadel mat, the Grassy mat that you get from Citadel, which of course is now out of production, then it works out about the same. And how would it rate to that? Well, I actually kind of prefer the level of detail that you get in this, and I think it's going to lend itself really, really well for filming in particular. The Grassy mat's fantastic. It's really good. It's very resilient. It's heavy laying, you know. But and of course it also kind of matches your miniatures because of the way that it is almost like a flock material. But the way that the designs on these have been done gives them that 3D effect right from the start, and that is incredibly impressive. So where you think that you would lose out because you're playing on a flat surface, you're going to lose out on that level of immersion and detail, actually you gain, and you gain in a way which is clean, which is easy to wipe up if you spill something, which isn't going to tear easy. You know, it's going to be, you're going to have to have a lot of wear and tear on these things, and you're going to have to try quite hard to beat them up, it seems so far. And that's what it seems as well from the other guys that are using them across the internet. Although that's first impressions, I might have to come back and review that at another time. So, do I think that they're worth it in terms of cost? Yes. If you went and bought the Citadel gaming board, which comes in the 4 squares, I think that's still available, then that costs a lot of money. It's hundreds and hundreds of pounds. The fact that you can get these out and just whack them onto a kitchen table, or what I've done here, I've got a 4x4 piece of plywood, the fact that you can just get it out, pop it on that, means that you've got a gaming board that is there, which has got a huge amount of detail and a tremendous level of immersion. Do you need 4 of them like I've got? Certainly not. You know, pick one, and maybe, you know, in your group of friends, each of you get one, and when you go to different people's houses, you're getting a different gaming experience because you're playing in a different world, which I think is pretty cool actually. And the fact that, you know, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of terrain, even with this small array of complex buildings that I've got here, it doesn't take a huge amount of terrain to really bring the board to an extra level of life. And that's when we come to, you know, the detailing. The fact that you've got that 3D effect on all of the prints. The fact that some thought's gone into the design work. I really like the design work on this. Because it's busier, it seems like it has less of a 3D effect, but it gets away with that. I like the kind of avenues of wargaming. You can create line of sight when you're playing the game. It's going to be really interesting when you've got buildings down these different ways that the roads angle off. It's not just like a straight crossroads going across or going up and down. It's on an angle, it's slightly skew-if, and you've got those kind of lanes, which I really like that actually. But it's not just on the busy board that I'm impressed, it's the fact that on those, what are Barren boards, so Barren Wasteland, the Alpine and the Grassy plains, that from a distance and from close-up, you get that same kind of standard of effect. It looks like it's 3D. It looks like you know, the miniatures are going to really be brought to life when they're on, which is really cool. So I'm very much looking forward to getting some games on them. In fact, the one that I'm probably least impressed with is the Grassy Plains battle map. Probably the least impressed with the design of that in terms of where the paths are. It seems to be a little bit more messy and a little bit more all over the place, so it'll probably lend itself a bit better to having sort of scattered woodland terrain on it, rather than as much a kind of like a rural building setting perhaps, because it is a bit all over the place, and there does seem to be areas where the clearings aren't quite big enough. It doesn't seem to be as well thought out where the paths are compared to how it is on this urban terrain. However, the way that they have achieved the grassy effect on it is absolutely superb, and even on the paths there is a level of realism there, especially when you zoom in on the camera, which is just absolutely superb. So I really like that. Hopefully I can get hold of the Swamplands one at some point, because that looks really cool as well. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing these gaming mats. What I will do is I'll put a link in the descriptions below for how you can get hold of these Frontline gaming mats if you want to go and check them out. Probably a good idea to club together with some mates so that you all combine on the shipping, because it is going to be the shipping which is the cost, unless of course you pick them up from the UK. But what would I give them out of 10? Well, so far I would certainly give them a 9 out of 10. We'll have to see when we're playing on them. So coming up next is one of my terrain reviews. I am going to be looking at these complex buildings, these pre-painted complex buildings here, resin buildings, which nicely come pre-painted. You don't have to put them together, as you've seen with some of the foreground terrain that GBHL Damien's been doing in his hobby vlogs, which appealed to me because it seems like he's had to put quite a lot of effort into those, although they do look superb. So I am going to be reviewing these, and I'll be reviewing them on this board as well, so make sure you keep an eye out for that video. Don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe. Make sure you like our Facebook page and that you follow us on Twitter, and pledge to Jamie on Patreon if you can as well. Try and get yourself down to the GBHL tournaments across the country. Support your hobby guys, and happy strategy battle gaming.